Hey community, welcome to our sermon podcast for wanderers, seekers, and thinkers, for deconstructing and reconstructing. This is a feed of Open Door Church, a faith community focused on God's love and grace, a progressive church built around action, community, and people. Enjoy this week's message and check back often as we're posting new content every week.
We're making a bit of a transition to a new series this morning. So I'm going to do kind of an introduction thing, and then we'll spend the next few weeks walking through something that is, how could we say, close to my heart. I don't use that kind of language very often, but we're going to try it. And then you're going to go, that was a weird thing for him to use that language on. Anyway, here's what we're doing. We are going to spend the next few weeks breaking down a little bit, and hopefully not in a dry or difficult way, but in sort of a very accessible kind of way. We're going to spend some time with liberation theology. My intro this morning is sort of a here's why. I've told some of these stories before, and you will notice that liberation theology sort of seeps into different messages and different things that I talk about or think about or read about. But we haven't really spent time digging into what it is and why it is. And so this morning I wanted to give you a little bit of how I came to that place and why, and sort of, peel back some of the dangerous vocabulary or language that you might have heard about it. So first things first, let me tell you a little bit of a story. One sec, here we go. A little precursor story to liberation theology. So, I've shared some of this before, but I was talking with some friends this week about deconstruction and my process. It's not language I used at the time, but certainly that's what language would have been used about my process many, many years ago. And they were asking some questions like, well, what did that look like? How did you know? What did you do? How did you respond? What were some questions that sort of spurned those thoughts? And what were those thoughts that helped you through? And so I've shared some of this with you before. Whether you were here or not is a different story, but I want to give you a little bit of a moment when my faith sort of just quit working for me. And I needed a way out. I needed a way through, you might be able to say. I needed an alternative voice, an alternative process, a different look. To be quite direct and simple, there came a point in time when the theology that I had internalized, I would say that I grew up with, I would say that was taught to me both explicitly and implicitly, that theology just didn't answer questions. More than that, it encouraged me not to ask questions. And as I began to experience other thoughts, other ideas, other people and experiences in the world outside of the bubble that I grew up in, I began to ask questions that my faith could not answer, that my theology couldn't answer. And so this started me on a journey, and to be fair, this started me on a journey with a few others. It wasn't alone. I don't know that I could have done it alone. I was extremely thankful for some very good friends, including Jenna, my wife, not at the time, and a couple other friends that we walked through this process together. and began sort of peeling back the layers of faith and theology. And one moment in particular that I have shared before, but I can share again, was an experience. We were studying in Germany. We were living there and studying at the time, and was an experience in the dead of winter, going and visiting and sort of seeing firsthand the Auschwitz camp, and getting a sense of the lives and the people there, and what that looked like, and to be fully dressed with boots and coats and toques and everything to stay warm, and still experiencing the bitter cold, knowing that the people living there through that time period, encamped there through that time period with next to nothing on their bodies, and knowing that people who serve and worship and faithfully follow the same God that I do held on to their faith. Many that held on to their faith through a time of extreme trauma and oppression. And I thought, I don't think I could handle this, and this doesn't make sense. What I've been taught doesn't make sense. What I've been taught about these people doesn't make sense. What I've been taught about my theology and about how I handle this moment doesn't add up and doesn't make sense to me. And so I began asking really hard questions in that moment. And things began to just crumble for me. And it didn't stop there. It snowballed. That question led to other questions. Other questions led to what it means for my entire faith to be focused around what I get at the end of it. None of it made sense to me. And so I started from the ground up. I started from what I could see, what I could experience, and was some sort of yearning, some sort of pulling, quite frankly, in nature, in creation, in the cosmos, in some ill-defined experience that I could not name and could not grasp. Ultimately, however, it was exposure and study into liberation theology that gave me a path forward, a path where I could read the text and find some realness in what I was doing, find something that wasn't about me, find something that wasn't motivated by my own selfishness, to be really direct. And so I share over the next few weeks some of the key pieces of liberation theology as sort of an alternative path for us. Now, here's the thing. You have heard that it is said that liberation theology is dangerous. Maybe you have heard that, you have heard that it's said that liberation theology promotes universalism, or that it advocates for violence, or that it will, and this is one of my favorite lines that I've come across. I'm going to quote it, actually. The acceptance, this is some of the great stuff out there. The acceptance of liberation theology will almost certainly spell destruction for the church. Now, let me tell you. Gotta go back to my notes. Let me tell you, it is dangerous. It is extremely dangerous. It is dangerous to the status quo. It is dangerous to those in power. It is dangerous to those who have lived with privilege and fear the loss of it. Liberation theology is all of that. And for those that have told you that it's dangerous, they are right. Unfortunately, it's dangerous, unfortunately for them, it's dangerous for all of the right reasons. It is dangerous because it calls us into a deeper understanding of what Jesus was doing for those around them. It is dangerous because it calls into question the way that we spiritualize Jesus' work, so that we don't have to focus on those who are on the margins or hear the voices of those who are oppressed, or lift up and overturn those systems of structure. Lift up those on the margins and overturn the systems of structure that keep them there. That is why it is dangerous. And it is dangerous, to be super direct. But here's the thing, and I've played with this idea for a while now, and I'm never quite certain that my idea is actually understood when I say it. So I'm on a limb here to try to express this feeling right now. In the West here, especially as the dominant religious or Christian narrative of white evangelicalism that we see and hear, that is conservative, that is concerned with power, that is concerned with control, I can argue. In the midst of that, we have had to find a way to make faith work. In a weird kind of way. Just hang with me for a minute. In a weird kind of way, we've had to find a way to make faith work. So as Jesus goes into villages and moves with a group of people that are on the edges of society and cares for those and crosses cultural boundaries to lift up those that are oppressed, that are pushed aside, as he does that, it doesn't relate to a wealthy, majority white Christian faith that is full of privilege. We struggle to relate to what Jesus was doing. We struggle to understand what this was for. When he opens his ministry in Luke and reads from Isaiah, saying, "The Spirit of the Lord is upon me because he has anointed me to bring good news to the poor. He has sent me to proclaim release to the captives and recovery of sight to the blind, to let the oppressed go free, to proclaim the year of the Lord's favor. But if you are the oppressor," forgive me for labeling you that way, or myself, "if you are the one with wealth, if you are the one with privilege, if you are the one that is not poor and is not captive and is not blind or oppressed, how do you read this? How do you relate to it? How do you internalize Jesus' launching point of his ministry?" And what I would put to you, and what I would, what claim I'm attempting to make, is that in an effort to still connect with Jesus' actual message, we spiritualized it. Because he has anointed me to bring good news to the poor in spirit, release to the captives of moral sin, recovery of sight to the blind who can't see faith, to let those oppressed by sin, go free. Do you see how in each of those moments we shift just enough so that we can spiritualize this and still relate to it? Liberation theology at its core does this one simple thing. It calls you back to the ground. It calls you back to the moment. It calls you back to the people that Jesus is interacting with and says, in this reading, how do we read this from the eyes of those who are marginalized? From the eyes of those who are oppressed? Walter Brueggemann might say it like this: from the place of the brickyard, from the place of slavery. Now tell me, if you hear this preached as one marginalized, or let's set a real stage. Let's put you, you're going to have to do some work here because you probably don't know what it looked like or what it felt like or what it meant, but let's put you in slavery in first century Rome with wealth and privilege around you and all of your privileges and rights taken away from you. And Jesus of Nazareth comes and speaks, saying, I come to bring good news to the poor, release to the captives, recovery of sight to the blind, to let the oppressed go free. In that place, as a slave receiving that message from someone with the power to move and to make that be, to make that reality, these two verses bring an entirely different reading. It is no longer a mental game or a moral game or a game about faith that is something you believe in, but is about a faith that you believe, that you hope in an undoing of the structures of power. That's where liberation theology comes from. It is giving voice to those without a voice. It is shedding light on those without privilege and that have been pushed to the margins. Let's do one more just to help us set the stage for what this is and feels like. Now, I know we're putting ourselves in a debate by going to this passage next. But we're going to look at, here we go. I got lost. Time out. Okay. I know we're putting ourselves in the middle of a debate by doing this, but bear with me. In Matthew chapter 25, and I just gave my hand away. You all know what we're doing and where we're going. The king will say to those at his right hand, and this is a parable. This is an allegorical story. The king will say to those on his right, "Come, you who are blessed by my Father, inherit the kingdom prepared for you from the foundation of the world. For I was hungry, and you gave me food. I was thirsty, and you gave me something to drink. I was a stranger, and you welcomed me. I was naked, and you gave me clothing. I was sick, and you took care of me. I was in prison, and you visited me." And the righteous will answer, "When did we do this?" And the king will answer them, "Truly, I tell you, just as you did to those who are marginalized, who are members of my family, you did for me. Now, if you've been isolated from your community, kicked out of your church and your neighborhood and your village because you are afflicted with an illness that is deemed unclean by the rest of society. You are living off of scraps as one who begs for food and relies on the generosity and compassion of passerbyers to eat and survive. And Jesus says to you, looks you in the eyes, face to face. When I was a stranger, you welcomed me in. When I was naked, you gave me clothing. When I was hungry, you saw it and you gave me food. The righteous in that story are those who are on the ground caring for their neighbor, lifting up and undoing the bonds of oppression. Almost in every episode, if we can talk that way, of the life of Jesus, we see him entering into the lives of others in ways that restores community, undoes the work of systems of marginalization, and brings light and life to people struggling to survive. Liberation theology asks us to read this passage and the rest of the Gospels through the lens of those who are oppressed. As a white cis male in North America with a U.S. passport, I have to work to read my scripture from this place. It doesn't come natural because it's not my experience. I have to listen to the voices, lift up the voices of those who have experienced it. Liberation theology is an effort to bring light to those voices. And it is the reason that I was able to remove the mostly selfish nature of my faith prior to that process of deconstruction or peeling back the layers of things, of asking questions that I couldn't answer. This gave me a way forward. And it is the reason that so much that you hear it so often in my messages and in my thoughts and in my understanding about how we are to do this church and this life. So I see it as a worthy few moments or few weeks that we can spend walking through it and truly getting to know it instead of in passing, instead of just side comments, but truly to dig in and to go, what does this mean, and how does it give me new tools to understand faith and the work of Jesus in my life, in this world, in this moment, and what is my call now that I have begun opening the door to a different way of understanding Jesus.
Thanks for listening to this sermon podcast from Open Door Church. Our intro and outro music was created by Lee Rosevere and is used under a Creative Commons by attribution license. Have a great week. Ask the hard questions and explore God's love. Everyone is always welcome to join the journey with us at Open Door. Learn more at opendoorfamily.ca. That's opendoorfamily.ca.